I've actually taught in art schools for 25 years. The course that I did as a student was meant to train you as a high school teacher. And in those days, you could get a scholarship to do that teaching course, so it was the only way I could go to university was to get this scholarship to learn to be a teacher, which I never did. Never did any high school teaching. I got involved with archaeologists and the work I did in Pakistan and various other places was all to do with that. I ended up in ANU in Canberra on a 5-year contract, and when that was coming to an end, I had no idea what I was going to do. I knew that trying to make pots and sell them was going to be economically a bit of a struggle. And making a short story of it, I got offered a job teaching about glazes at the Canberra Art School, and that was how I got involved in teaching. What happened there was that it was only a part-time job, so it wasn't exactly ideal, but it got me back into working with clay. Served a very useful purpose in that way. And I enjoyed working with there were some really good students came through there, people that are well known now. I think of people like Simone Fraser has become quite well known. But the part-time teaching, once I started a family and having kids, I wasn't producing enough money. And so I looked around for a job and got this job in Gippsland. And that had all the advantages, which was paid a very good salary. So you didn't have to make an income from selling work, which meant you could be experimental and take risks. Not worry too much if things didn't work out. It didn't matter very much. The paycheck still came the next Thursday. It meant being able to live in the country rather than in a city, and that suited me perfectly well. I ended up working only with postgraduate students, people doing graduate diploma and masters and doctorates. And that was really interesting because it was actually the beginning of that idea of teaching at a distance. You could do that with people who were experienced. Think of somebody like Marinesen, for example, did a master's. I mean, she knew what she was doing. All we needed to do was talk on the phone every now and then. She'd make video of the work she was doing, and I could see that. And so it had all the advantages. The only disadvantage was you had to go to meetings and had to put up with bureaucracy, and eventually that got to me and I gave it away, and fortunately been quite comfortable ever since, really. The most important thing since giving up teaching, I think, was meeting up with Anna Maas of Skepsy, because Anna runs galleries differently than a lot of other people. She's very, very serious about looking after collectors, and I mean, she's very personable and friendly, and so people like her, which is always good. But on the other side of it, she's done an extremely good job of building up my reputation and, sort of talking up the work. I think in any form of the arts, it doesn't matter what it is, I think everybody who makes progress has some kind of patron. And I've been very lucky. I've had a couple of people that kind of acted as patrons. They looked after you, helped you, promoted you. Um, and I think that's been incredibly important to us. But I don't know how people starting off get going if you haven't got somebody like that to help you along. When I was at school, if you misbehaved, you were sent off to the library, and so there was a typewriter there, and I actually learnt to do typing when I was a kid, and that sort of helped. But I was always interested in reading and writing. Well, somebody said it's a way of working out what you think, and I like that idea. When you start to write, you've got to clarify what you're thinking. So it's just a way of helping you to think. Some things, some of the things that you can see behind you are kind of standard things that I've done. The work I'm making at the moment is work. I sell some work through Craft Victoria and through Sturt and Shepparton and, those sort of places. And it's better to just have the standard kind of things that seems to sell better. There's this whole studio's full of stuff that I've played around with. There's a lot of, if you look around, there's a lot of things made out of wire. They never actually got, well, some of them got exhibited, but I spend a lot of time doing stuff that never goes out of this room. It just keeps me amused. Don't know what I don't know what the process is. I don't want to think about the process too much because it's not about thinking. The writing's about thinking, but working with clay for me is not about thinking about it. It's a thing that you do more intuitively. Did a course that was meant for high school teachers at New South Wales University, and you had a choice. You could do furniture design and making, or silversmithing, or ceramics, or something else. You could do painting. And I thought I'd probably do the furniture thing because my father was a carpenter, builder, and used to working with wood, but I saw Ivan McMakin throwing a pot and I was just mesmerised. How the hell do you do that? I'm still working that out. No, well, in thinking about why I've kept doing it, the problem with this is that people have asked me questions so many times that it's difficult to think of a non-standard answer. The standard answer as to why I keep doing it is curiosity. I'm just curious about the materials, I'm curious about shapes of things, I'm curious. Not very interested. There's a whole thing developed about a lot of isms. There's modernism and deconstructionism and all these things, which I never really took very much interest in personally. I had to look at them in terms of teaching, but so most of what I've done, the actual things tend to be abstract kind of things. Even a cup that you drink out of is an abstract thing. When you look in nature, there aren't any cups. Animals drink out of pools of water. But also abstract kind of shapes. That's what work with wires about, it's all kind of abstraction. People used to say, what is the meaning in your work? And I could never, meant to me it didn't have meaning. I didn't know what it meant. It was just was. But the answer to the question about what keeps you working is, I think, curiosity. I wonder what would happen if I did this. The whole thinking about the nature of glazes, about surfaces, and of thinking about forms, goes back when I was a student in Sydney. I was extremely interested in painting, and I was particularly interested. I used to go around to all the exhibitions, and particularly interested in abstract expressionism, which was a thing at the time. And I really wanted to do that. Made a mistake in trying it and it didn't work, and trying it and it didn't work. And I didn't realise that it, probably takes you 20 years to develop something that works well. But that early interested in that sort of abstraction, I think everything probably relates back to that. What I found though is the work 30 or 40 years ago, the forms were much more abstract. I was much more interested in sculpture. But now I tend to be becoming really conservative and making very bowl-like bowls and cups and things like that. I actually like the idea that those sort of things are quite intimate. And you saw my collection of cups over there. What I like about them is you pick up one of them made by a friend of yours, and it's a very intimate connection to your friend. So I like that intimacy of things that you use in your hands. One of the most significant events in my life was that in May of 2016 my wife died, and one of the things that happened after that, I've got a friend in Oregon called Frank Boyden, who does, he's been doing wood firing work, and Frank phoned me because Barbara had died, and we were talking, and I said to him, are you still working with the Anagama kiln? And Frank said, it's undignified for a man my age to be crawling in and out of one of those goddamn things. So I thought, well, I'm the same age as Frank, so if it's undignified for him, it must be undignified for me. And besides, my knees hurt. I'm really tired of this thing where you only fire a kiln once a year. The thing about that kind of work was you made a form, you put it in the kiln, and the kiln did the surface for you. You had a reasonable concept of how it might go, but it always surprised you. And so I had a particular idea of, again, that sort of abstraction on the surface. And so if I wasn't doing it in that big kiln, I had to think, well, what the hell do you do now? And so I've been trying to develop, not so much develop glazes, but develop ways of putting the glaze on that gives you some sort of unusual result. And ever since, the last 5 years now, I've been trying to extend the kind of work that I used to do in a different sort of technology. Simple answer to what was attractive about wood firing is, I think, I grew up in the snowy mountains where in the winter time it was cold and there was no electricity. And so if you wanted to get warm, you lit a fire with wood. If you wanted to cook something, you had a stove that was heated with wood. And so basically on one side of it I'd learned how to handle wood and, learnt about burning wood as a kid. Learned about preparing it and using it. But also I think myself there's some sort of psychological thing. It's the middle of winter, there's snow outside, it's cold. You're sitting there in front of a warm fire, you've got your family around you. I mean, psychologically, that's a wonderful sort of feeling. And so I think that's part of the attraction. It's just psychologically very comforting, if that makes sense. The other thing was I'd actually read in the late 1970s and early 1980s, people in America were starting to look at wood firing in Japan, and that word abstraction comes in again. The Japanese work had that sort of quality, so I thought that'd be good to do that. So a number of us started building these big kilns. My friend Peter Thompson said the problem was they brought in this Japanese technology but they forgot the instruction book. And so we had to kind of work it out for ourselves. You've got this great big kiln, what do you do with it? And so the people in Australia who started off that kind of work, we were all just making it up as we went along. We didn't know what to do, which made it distinctive. A lot of the Americans who were interested had actually gone to Japan to study. And so they adopted the Japanese approach to it, whereas we didn't know what we were doing, so we just made it up. And that made the work fairly distinctive. It also helps, I think, in any form of art to have something that you're recognised for. You're recognised for a particular style of jazz, or whatever it is, recognised for a particular type of painting or dancing or whatever. And so as a public thing, it seemed to be a good idea to, publicise I'm a wood firer. But the fact is I was doing all sorts of other stuff all the time, but just for my own amusement. And so it was I don't know, sounds a bit crass to call it a marketing strategy, but it was something like that. What eventually happened is that it started to become fashionable, and so all sorts of people wanted to do some wood firing. They wanted this romantic, it's not romantic at all. Your face gets burnt and in my case my lungs get buggered up by the smoke. There's nothing romantic about that, but a lot of people think it's romantic, the whole process. And I'm quite happy to not be entirely associated with that anymore, mainly because too many people were doing the same thing. If new people were coming in working with that sort of technology but developing some kind of entirely new thing, then it would make sense. But you just see the same thing over and over again. And one example I've used is I can't imagine being Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger has been singing the same song for 50 years. It must eventually drive you nuts to do that. So it's actually quite nice to be trying to do something different and seeing what happens. The original travelling that I did had nothing to do with sort of making ceramics as an art. The original travelling, I got involved in a project in Pakistan where we were studying traditional crafts. There were a group of people and we were studying the whole thing, weaving and glass making and all sorts of stuff, including ceramics. And so one thing that influenced me a lot, I think, was seeing really simple ways of working. They looked simple. If you tried to do it, it wouldn't be quite so simple. But, basically people would build their own kilns. They would do everything themselves. And that's what I've done here. That's, most of what you see I've done myself. I haven't gone and bought stuff. Actually, the small wood-fired kiln I've got over there cost me about $300 or $400 or something. If you bought a kiln to do that, it'd probably cost you $15,000. So it makes economic sense as well. I've just finished a book. The publishers call it a memoir. It's sort of a life story, and there's a very, very long bit in that about being a child. Grew up in a small town in the Snowy Mountains called Berrydale, and way I like to think about it is you weren't just a child of your family, you were a child of the town. Everybody knew who you were, everybody knew everybody, and I liked the fact you could just wander around and kind of go to people's houses and you just went in. Nobody took any notice. It was a very, very pleasant way to grow up. I don't think it exists anywhere anymore. Yeah, my father was a builder and was kind of expected, everybody expected that I'd follow on. My take on that is I probably would have been a lot wealthier if I'd done that. Building places in the snowfields would have been very profitable. I'm perfectly happy with the way it's worked out. The basic material in ceramics is clay, and it's probably the easiest of all materials to get. It's everywhere. There's clay out there. Ivan McMeekin, who was my original teacher, taught us about digging clay yourself and making it usable to make pots from. Thing is, in Sydney in those days, in the early 1960s when I started, there was only one supplier of clay. It was a brickworks that used to pack some clay into plastic bags and you could buy that and make terracotta out of it. And nobody in Australia had been making stoneware. Everything was fired at much lower temperatures. And everybody knows about the Boyds and their painted ceramics and all that stuff. That was all low temperature. The whole idea of Asian stoneware came in with people like Ivan and Peter Rushforth. And if you wanted stoneware clay, you had to make it up yourself. So we actually learned to do that. The situation now is you can go to a shop and buy whatever sort of clay you want. And there is a place near here. A fellow I know's got a quarry. I can go and get clay from there if I wanted. But I'm not very into digging holes in the ground, so, and it's a lot of trouble doing that. There's factories that make it up. Yeah, basically I was taught to, how to develop mixes of materials that would work to make stoneware, and I did. My doctorate, which I did early on, was about developing porcelain. So I've got a good knowledge of how to make up all sorts of clay bodies, but I'm more interested now. I just go to a shop and buy what I want, and I've got a clay mixer there. I keep all the stuff that's left over and mix it up. I'm actually not too worried these days what the mixture is. It doesn't matter very much. A lot of people are very fussy about clay. I just use whatever I've got. The nice thing is, if if the mixture you make up is different to what you've used before, then the results will be a little bit different. And say, oh, that's nice, something different. I'm not IKEA. I don't want everything to be the same. I'd like it to be different. Tony Martin, who lives in Newcastle in New South Wales, did a series of articles in the magazine Ceramics, Art and Perception, where he went and interviewed different people, and then turned that interview into an article. The one he did about me is actually the story's in Tony's article that in high school, for some reason, I took a particular dislike to the chemistry teacher, and so I used to misbehave in his classes, and we mutually disliked each other. And so I went to him one day and said, this is completely bloody silly, that there's no point in us going on behaving like this. I'll make a deal with you. If you leave me alone, I'll sit up the back of the room. I'm not going to listen to what you say. I'll teach myself. I can learn out of books, so I'm not going to listen to you. But I won't do anything. I'll just sit there, so it won't be any problem. And I'll get an A in chemistry. And so I've always been interested in chemistry. They say that education's what you've got left when you forget everything you ever learnt at school. That's the case. I've forgotten all that, but the nice thing about being interested in the chemistry of glazes is that after a while you start to forget about all that chemistry stuff and start to kind of intuitively know what material's going to do. And so you can make it up without thinking about the chemistry. It's more an intuitive process. It's not a very good analogy. I was thinking of, mixing paints to produce a particular colour. You don't know what the chemistry is of those paints, but you can sort of mix things up and get what you want. I'm friendly with Kroh, who's been around for a long time. He was incredibly kind to me when I was a student, and I still keep in contact with him. And he said a few things when I was a student that I've never forgotten. One thing was, learn everything you can about materials, learn everything possible, and then forget the whole lot of it. And that's when you start working, when you stop worrying about all that sort of stuff and start thinking about what you're actually making. The philosophers, back when I was teaching sort of 25 years ago, were trying to remove skill. They were trying to remove concepts of quality. Postmodernism was, it was postmodernism. I still think that you can't work independently of in ceramics, you can't work independently of materials. You can't work independently of understanding how to heat things up. Just the same as in music. Somebody who's an excellent guitarist will very, very, very carefully select the guitar that they use. They won't just pick up any old thing. They're very conscious of the quality of sound. Painters that I know are very conscious of the subtleties of colour. I don't think you can escape from that. And I know in writing, quite often you're looking for a particular word and you open the thesaurus and there's 30 words there. And you very carefully pick one of those out that says exactly what you want. You know, writing, you're very careful about words. So, you know, that interest in materials is important. The highlights of working internationally are, I mean, the two things to me, the most important thing is making friendships with people. Secondary thing is going, I'm not all that interested in going around and looking at cathedrals and, you know, even in a sense not all that interested in looking at natural stuff, although it's much more interesting than looking at cities and things. The main things that I remember about exhibitions elsewhere are all that associated stuff, the people, you know, the little bits of insight into how different people function. The convenient answer to why I'm interested in unusual sort of glazes, I think, is that thing again about abstraction. I mean, I suppose a sensible answer would be I'm interested in looking at the range of what you can do in ceramics. In a very limited sort of way. I think if you look online you can find a million people who are making ceramics and you can think, oh, I'd love to do that and I'd love to do that, and you go nuts if you start thinking like that. You better to ignore what everybody else does and just work in your own little area of it. And I think that's probably the best word to describe it. I'm interested in sort of abstract qualities. In the wood firing I was interested in colours because, you know, the old saying was it's all brown pots. That's what people used to say about wood firing, it's all just brown pots. So I was interested, and you can get an enormous range of colours. But what I'm interested in this month is not what I was interested in a month ago. It keeps changing. Each year, back in those days, each year they had the competition, but they had an exhibition of ceramics from one particular country. And this year it was Australia. There were 13 of us. Full stories in my book. There were 13 of us, and I was the only one who actually went there. And I'd actually cleaned some stuff off one of my wood-fired pots with an angle grinder and a wire brush, and it left some stains on the surface. And I didn't have time to clean it. So I went, took a chemical with me to the gallery and said to them, I'd like to take mine out of the case and just clean this off. And just, it took a full day and 50 people being consulted about whether you could actually do that. I just enjoyed the whole madness of all the Italian and everybody gesticulating. It's hard to, I can't work out why people like my work unless they tell me. The funny thing is that the opposite to that is, why do I like other people's work? And often I don't know. I think in my case, the work, not so much alike, but I don't think in terms of liking stuff, I think in terms of reacting to it. So the question is, why do you react to somebody's work so strongly? It's often the case that you really learn something from it. You haven't seen anything like it before. And so it starts you thinking about it and wondering about it and wondering about your reaction. It's also like thinking of somebody whose work I like. I rarely react to work by Susan Murphy. I prefer not to think of what I'm reacting to. I just think, yeah, that's developed this policy years ago of going into an exhibition and working out which particular one in the exhibition I'd like to steal. Because that's one that you really value, you're willing to take the risk of stealing the thing in order to take it home. I realise that none of this makes much sense, an art critic will talk at great length about what's important about the work and, what its context is and where it fits into and talk about all sorts of things. I like to think that over a long period of time you develop a kind of language of ceramics which can't be translated into words. And that's easier to understand if you think about music. You react to music, but you're not sitting there analysing it or trying to find words you're reacting to the music. And I'm reacting to the ceramic language of things in the same way without needing to convert it into words or convert it into some sort of communicable thing. It's difficult to communicate. Yeah, one of the things that's important to me is that not just making things out of clay, but just making things in general. I started off when I was a kid. I used to spend a lot of time in my father's shed because he had all these tools there, and there was wood, and I made all sorts of things out of wood. Starting off as a little kid, and a lot of my time was spent doing that. That now translates into the problem now with somebody starting off in ceramics is if you buy clay, a bag of it's $25 or something. If you want to buy a kiln, you've got to spend, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. If you buy stuff, the economics of it, I can't imagine how anybody can make it work. And so it's been fortunate for me that I've really enjoyed making things. If I need a kiln, I build a kiln. If I need some shelving in my studio, I build the shelving. If I need a shed, I build a shed. And all of that is just as enjoyable as making something in clay. I like the idea that you start off with nothing and end up with something. That's also like the idea that might sound a bit silly, but you work through the day and at the end of the day you go away and then you come back. So that's what I've done today. I really love that feeling of having a look at what you've done that day. I'm not some sort of Luddite. I use phones and computers and things, but you notice there's not anything like that here. I don't go near those things through the day because they're just a distraction. When I became involved with Barbara way back in late 1980s, we wanted somewhere to live. I actually had a house in a town near here, but didn't really want to stay there. Looked around, and at the time Jeff Kennett was the Premier. I think he sold off about 90 rural small schools, and this was one of those. And I had a looked in here and thought perfect place to work in. There was no house here, so we got a house built. But the thing, I can't work when there's other people around. I can't imagine how people share studios and do things like that. I'd just become rigid. And so one of the real advantages of this place is it's a nice place to be. But another advantage is people don't just drop in. You know, there's no distractions from people. And so we bought the place, built a house, been here for nearly 30 years, I think. And I've got no intention of going anywhere else. It's very convenient, actually. I go into Melbourne sometimes. Usually what happens is I go in on the train because I had driving back and forwards. Go on the train, get out of the train, walk up into Swanston Street, think, I'd rather go home, so I turn around and come back. So if I've got something to do, I do that and just come home. I don't like being in the city very much. They tell me there's lots of nice places to eat, lots of entertainment, but we have food here. I was very bad at teaching beginners because I didn't have the patience and I wasn't interested and I didn't care whether they got anywhere or not. And, I mean, I was very bad in that role. But I really love working with postgraduates because the idea was each of them determined what they wanted to work on themselves. And so working with a range of people, you were involved in a whole lot of different aspects of ceramics. Some of them were sculptors too, I had a few sculptors. And so it was really interesting to get that insight into what a whole lot of other people were doing. And I mean, they were all experienced and all adults, so the vast majority of them became friends. You know, I'm still really friendly with a lot of those people. It's nice to have friends.